Greetings one and all, I'm Red Angel, and welcome to another episode of Late Night Ponderings, my series of mini-editorials that covers a wide range of subjects. Today's subject is System Shock Remastered and judging things by their own merit. Night Dive Studios, known for obtaining rights to classics like System Shock and re-releasing them on GOG, started a Kickstarter fund to raise money to do a complete remake of System Shock for modern-day systems. They had already done an enhanced edition back in 2015, so seeing a complete remake is no surprise. However, it does bring up some interesting questions like, should I go back and play the original game, or how is it compared to the games of today? Now, I've always thought you should try to go back and play the originals, because as the late great author Terry Pratchett said in his book, I Shall Wear Midnight, if you do not know where you come from, then you don't know where you are. And if you don't know where you are, then you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going wrong. I'm not going to completely focus on that particular question today. That'll be a topic for a future video. What I am going to focus on is comparing old games to games of today, something that happens an awful lot in all forms of media, which is troublesome. Let's use Pokemon as an example. You know how people will make a top X Pokemon gens list and there are those who will act as if Red and Blue are the worst because they're outdated? Then they will try to stick it to the Gen 1ers who will inevitably flock to their video and dislike it. Now, everyone has their reasons for disliking the video, but I have an elephant in the room that isn't always talked about in the comments. Why are you comparing a game from the 1990s to a game like Pokemon Black and White from the 2010s? Yeah, it's from the same franchise, but of course it's outdated compared to Black and White, or to games like X and Y. Video games don't always age well, and the fact that you can create a perfectly playable Red and Blue version in Minecraft should give you a clue on how far the franchise has come technologically. Or just look at how many Pokemon exist to get an inkling of that. Pokemon is a franchise you can look at to see how far it's come rather than comparing and contrasting games. Sure, you can have a preference for each set of games. I'm not saying that you can't, but you should compare it to other games from the same time rather than games that came out years prior. Back on topic, the original System Shock went with a cyberpunk-style interface that was innovative for its time, but it looks like a mess by today's standards. It didn't give you much direction other than a general place of where to go to annoy Shodan, so it was fairly easy to get lost and suddenly realize that you were way out of your league when hordes of mutants are tearing you apart. Not to mention the fact that the controls are very dated, you can run faster diagonally than you can straight, and the graphics can be dizzying at times if you decide to spin yourself too fast in the first-person view. Think about another game, the original Legend of Zelda. If you compare it to something like Ocarina of Time, then it'll definitely show its age. It gives you almost no clue where to go, you can get lost extraordinarily easily, the graphics are highly dated, and while the controls still hold up, they can be archaic at times. Now, of course, I'm not saying that you can't compare other aspects of the game that could have aged potentially well, like stories or characters. It's just when you get down to the more technical aspects, comparisons can be downright silly. Going back to System Shock, the original is still playable, and with it being released on GOG, you have the opportunity to get your hands on it long before the remake is released. Unfortunately, this means that there will be inevitable comparisons to the original, which isn't fair to compare a game from 1994 to 2016. There will be such a huge jump in technology that some will find it pointless to play the original. But it's not. When you compare the original System Shock to something, you should compare it to another game of the same genre around the same time. The same goes for the majority of video games, but it doesn't just apply to gaming. Some time ago I got into a discussion with a fellow reader about books and we brought up our favorites. The young man I was discussing it with was surprised that I brought up Wrinkle in Time amongst my favorite books, which included works from the likes of Virginia Woolf and George Orwell. When I asked why, he replied with, "It's a kid's book, it doesn't compare to books by those authors." My response was Madeleine L'Engle's famous quote about children's literature. You have to write the book that wants to be written, and if the book will be too difficult for grown-ups, then you write it for children. Then I asserted that I judged books by their own merits as well as the books in the same genre around the same time they were published. This is what I do for most things. Yes, I will make comparisons in my reviews and such, since it's an easy way of getting things across to build a better picture of something. But when it comes to the ultimate judgment, I use the work in question's own merits. When you compare two things together, you're effectively streamlining the work in order to make it palatable. If you offhandedly compare two things that are either ages apart or belong to two separate genres, you're reducing what the work is actually trying to do to a mere bullet point list. Which, judging by the gaming community's reaction to the bullet point list at the end of IGN reviews, is a bad way of going about criticizing things.